Serious. What revenge of your hit the victim way worse than you thought it would, to the point you said, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Story 1. When I was a kid, I was at a local river, a great swimming spot lots of people came to. My friend pushes me in the river, and naturally I came up spluttering and a little red in the face, but it was all in good fun. For the rest of the day I planned to get her back, waiting for my opportunity to push her in, until she was at the edge of the river drying off. I pushed her, but her flailing and the slippery nature of the rock she was on made her slip on the spot, and instead of just splashing into the water, she landed on her back, hitting the rocks hard, and then fell into the water. She was winded but thankfully otherwise unharmed. Our parents were furious at me, and I just spent the few seconds it took to get her out. Felt like a lot longer to me. Just hoping I hadn't broken her back or something. 210 Revenge. Would not do again. Story 2. 9th grade. Honors English class. The teacher didn't like me. Only teacher I ever had that didn't like me. Others would get frustrated with how my lack of effort at times, but still liked me as a person. She just flat out didn't like me. One of the reasons was that she didn't like athletes because they would miss her class regularly for travel for games. And I played 3 sports, so I was missing a good bit. Now I was also missing for academic stuff like math-science competitions and quiz bowl tournaments, but she was particularly bothered about missing for sports. Case in point, she would intentionally double the amount of homework due the day after long away games, knowing that the players wouldn't have the time to finish it all. And shocker, she didn't check homework every single day, but always checked after away games. I've written about her before, but she also would give me 70s and low 80s on papers without any red marks on them, but people around me would have red marks all over their paper and would have 90s. After one particularly low grade on an assignment that I knew I had actually done really well on, I inquired about it. Her exact response was that I was only doing 70% of my ultimate capability, and the others were doing 90% of theirs. So I specifically asked, does that mean my paper can be better than someone else's, but be 20+ points lower? And she said yes. And to show this wasn't just me misunderstanding things, she recommended me for an advanced writing class a year earlier than students were supposed to be able to take it. So if those 2 things weren't bad enough, she gave us an opportunity for extra credit toward the end of the year. We had to go to a local college's rendition of Antigone, write a 2,500-word paper on it, and tie it into what we discussed in class on the play, and also turn in our ticket and playbill. It was due on a Monday, and the play was only going on Friday, Sunday, so there was no way to turn it in ahead of time. But I was going to miss class that Monday all day for an academic competition, representing the school. And it was the biggest one of the year, like had to place top 10 in a previous competition to qualify. So it's obviously an excused absence. I told her for an entire week prior to the play that I was going to miss on Monday, and she told me multiple times to turn it in first thing Tuesday morning. So I go to the play, write the paper, go to the academic competition Monday and place first in one category and second in another. And then Tuesday morning, before basketball workouts at 7 a.m., I go to her room to turn in the assignment. She refuses to take it because it's late, and she didn't recall ever suggesting that I could turn it in on Tuesday. She told me 4 times. Her reasoning: 1. Another student that missed for the competition was able to turn it in. But that student lived across the street from the school. I lived 20 minutes away and couldn't drive. 2. My mom was a teacher at the school, so I could have just sent it with her, except I had been told to turn it in Tuesday, so there was no reason for me to think to have my mom turn in my assignment for me. Plus, she has her own students and classes to worry about. 3. I could have done the work Monday evening, which wouldn't be fair to the other students. So I went into the metadata for the paper that showed the last time it had been saved was Saturday afternoon. She still refused to grant me any credit for it. So I was out the $25 for the ticket, the time that it took. Plus, it really inconvenienced my mom, who had to pick me up Friday from practice, rush me home to shower and change, then rush me back downtown for the play, and then come pick me up again, 2 hours later. So my mom was pretty pissed about it too. This teacher also prided herself on the fact that nobody had ever made an A on her final exam. She thought she was the toughest teacher ever. Really, she just loaded students up with a bunch of busy work. So the last day of class, she gave a few minutes at the end of class and asked, "What's your biggest wish?" to the class as a whole. I piped up, "I wish for an A on the exam," and she laughed and said, "Yay, and I wish for $1 million and not to have to deal with you anymore." So, all of that sets up the final exam. It's 100 questions, and then a 5-point bonus question that asked those generic, What was your favorite part of the class? What did you learn? Etc. We got 2 hours to take the exam, and students that finished early had to wait until 1 hour was up, so that there was just one point of people getting up and leaving, rather than being distracting throughout. So I finished the 100 questions in about 20 minutes. So I spent the remaining part of the hour just blasting her in the bonus question. I said that I'm not sure I learned anything and pointed to her never making any comments on how to improve my writing. I said my favorite part of the class was it finally being over and not having to deal with her crap anymore, and brought up a number of other little things that happened on top of that, mentioned above. And I said that she was by far the worst teacher I had ever had, and that the school is worse off with her teaching the entire 9th grade. The bell rings for the hour, and I'm the only person of the entire 110 students to leave at the hour mark. Now, on exam days, the teacher doesn't proctor their own exam so that they are available to answer questions, or if the classes are split among different rooms. So I have to wait for my mom to finish proctoring a different exam, so I'm just sitting out in Breezeway. The teacher finds me, holding my exam, with tears in her eyes, and tells me to meet her in the principal's office. She then storms off, so I heat over. As I'm waiting there, I recount what happened to the soccer coach who is sitting there because he made some comment about, "Surprised to see you sent in here." Eventually she comes back in with my mom, who she pulled out of proctoring an exam, and we all go in to see the principal. She's crying, screaming, literally choking every minute or so. After about 45 minutes of me spilling everything I'd gone through that year, all things I'd already vented to my mom about plenty of times, the principal finally looks at her and goes, "How much was the question worth?" She said 5 bonus points, and he says, "Then just don't give him the bonus points." So I made a 98 on the final instead of a 103. Missed 2 questions. Every other student got the bonus points, and the next highest grade was an 81. Thinking she would get the last laugh, I noticed a few days before grades were due that one of my assignments from the second week of class all the way back in August had been dropped 10 points. My final grade ended up being a 94.4, which was a B at the time. But I couldn't prove that she had altered my grade. I just had them in a spreadsheet to determine my grade ahead of time. Should have been a 95.2, but nothing that would prove anything. Since I could have just typed it wrong, I didn't. The summer after, the school decided to change to a 10-point scale, and so 90 plus was an A, so my B became an A. She also had to have her homework assignments each week, signed off by the department chair, and she had to start accepting assignments via email. 2 years later, she was fired after other students started having real issues with her. Prior to me, the administration just thought it was a case of students complaining about the hard teacher. Still think she deserved every bit of it, but I certainly didn't think it would set in motion her getting fired. Though, again, she deserved it. Hopefully people are still reading. She sucked. Story 3. Had a lawyer a few years back who was a piece of absolute crap. Would go months between returning phone calls. Constantly late with court filings to the point the courts multiple times moved to have the case dismissed from lack of action. Lied to me constantly about anything and everything. Refused to be fired. Seriously, when I told him he was fired, he just ignored me and kept presenting himself as my lawyer. I had to get the courts involved to get him to stop. When I finally did fire him, he told me I had to be in court on a specific date. That didn't work for me. At a specific time. That didn't work for me. Or else the motion to withdraw wouldn't be accepted. So I got to the courtroom and the judge was super nice, but confused as to why I was there, and when I told him the story, the judge just goes, "Yeah, this is all done electronically. Not sure why your lawyer would tell you that, other than to be a d***." Needless to say, by the end of all this, I was pissed and wrote a 10-page bar complaint about 4 different lawyers in their office's unethical behavior. Well, the Bar Association decided this was a firm-wide encouraged pattern of behavior and threw the book at the 4 partners, disbarred for 5 years, restitution to clients, and only allowed to practice under supervision for a period of 5 years after they return. I felt a little bad, but goddamn, I was so freaking sick of being jerked around. Story 4. I was dating this girl, and my friend saw her around town a few times and humiliated her in an effort to embarrass me. I told him to stop bothering her, but he did it again. That night, I convinced him to try getting back together with his wildly insane and manipulative ex that he hadn't spoken to in years, thinking that he would just humiliate himself by trying. Well, they banged and got back together for a while, and had a baby. Now they're terrible single parents. Jesus, I think the consequences from this one are the worst in the thread. Story 5. My friends and I used to pull a lot of pranks on each other growing up, and about 10 years ago, I was helping my buddy set up a new business. He was ordering business cards, and the company he was going through was offering, I think, 500 or so, free with a large order. So we decided to prank our other friend. We made business cards with his name, phone number, home address, and had his job title as professional creep, with the slogan, "If I'm creepin', you ain't sleepin'." We passed these cards out all over town. He was getting really harassing phone calls for a while and couldn't figure out why. After about 2 years, he found one of the cards on a random fridge at a party and put 2 and 2 together. He was pissed and is still getting random calls 10 years later. I feel really bad about that one. Jesus, change your number. Story 6. In elementary school, there was a bully kid who would make fun of me. I had a bad bowl cut and was pretty small, so it wasn't surprising. Me and my friends usually just ignored him. Anyway, one day this kid from Brazil moved into the house next to mine. He was a year older. We used to play soccer together every day after school. I mentioned to him once that this kid would call me names, and usually while walking home from school would follow behind me, taunting me. One day I'm leaving school, and this kid is going slowly behind me on his bike shouting stuff. Just dumb kid stuff, you know? Brazil kid comes out of nowhere, knocks the kid off his bike, and just starts beating him. Bully is on the grass, crying and bleeding. Brazil kid grabs the bike and gives it to me. "You can keep this," and then walks away. I didn't know what to do. I just laid the bike next to the kid and walked home. He wasn't at school for like a week. Later in life, I found that kid had a really crappy home situation with a parents. I was 10 at the time. Always felt bad for that. Quit bullying me though. I still occasionally see that Brazilian guy, don't think he even remembers it. Cool on him for helping in his way, I just think it went too far. Story 7. My father and cousins were walking home from school. Well, my brother and I were walking, and my cousins were on bikes. They kept circling us and making fun of us because we didn't have bikes. One of my cousins then spits on me. Out of reflex, I blasted her with my trumpet case, and she went flying, landed on the concrete, and broke her arm. I felt awful. It was the first and last time I ever hit a girl. My family believed every word of the story, knew this cousin was always a total bitch to me, and largely believed she had it coming. I still felt awful though. The trumpet case. An elegant weapon for a more civilized age. Story 8. Had a roommate who basically let his new girlfriend move into our house in college. She helped herself to everything in the house, but never contributed. Finally, she parked in my parking spot, and that was my breaking point. I let all the air out of all of her tires, thinking she'd just air them back up and it would be an inconvenience. Instead, she ended up buying all new tires. Whoops. Never came clean about it. She's an idiot. Story 9. My sister used to kick my ass on the regular. She had mad anger problems and would go berserk over the littlest things. One time I turned the light on while she was trying to sleep. She beat me up, and I ended up going to prom with bruises all over me. All through the years, I never hit her back. I was a super sensitive kid, and if I ever hit back, I ended up crying to my mom about how I loved my sister and hated to hurt her. After I graduated, she had calmed down a bit, but she still had issues. Coming back from a small party one night and she is back on her old crap, just getting mad over something stupid and going totally crazy over it. We get home and get out of the car and say I'm driving home. She keeps saying I'm too drunk, even though I'd only had 2-3 mini beers. She grabs the back of my shirt and I'm so pissed off at her, I turn around really fast with my fist out to hit her arm or something. She immediately lets out a blood-piercing scream and drops to the ground. Blood is spurting everywhere. She leaves a trail as she runs inside and wakes up our mom and dad. Turns out, I broke her nose, pretty freaking bad, but my mom and dad kept saying it couldn't be that bad, because I had done it, and that she must have really been freaking with me, for me to have done something like that after all these years of her beating on me. I felt so awful. I cried and tried to say sorry, but she ended up going to the hospital. I don't feel so bad now because she purposely never paid the bill, thinking she could bully me into paying it, and she never lets it go. She always says I'm the reason her credit and stuff is bad, and that she still has collections agencies calling her over the ER bill. I ain't paying that crap. Consider it payment for the years of abuse. Story 10. My older brother was always quite horrible to me as a child, and my parents never really did much about it. He was also much bigger than me, so I couldn't retaliate in a physical way because I would be swiftly crippled, cross-faced a walls of Jericho. One day I had just had enough, my revenge. He had been playing Rome Total War for a good 6 hours a day for about 3 weeks. I started a new game and overwrote his save file. Never seen Fury like it. I regretted it at the time cause he was so angry it scared me, and it made him dislike me even more. But now I praise my 13-year-old self for hitting him where it clearly hurt most. Story 11. This one wasn't really a planned revenge, but it's one I still feel guilty about whenever I think about it. When I was a kid, I was extremely easy to scare with jump scares, and I hated them. I would always enter fight or flight mode whenever something jumped out at me, and then I'd be mad as hell afterward. When my buddies caught on to this, they made it their business in life to jump out at me and scare me any chance they got. Despite my hate of being scared, I was a huge fan of Halloween, and I had a Halloween party every year, either close to or on the big day. Naturally, this was the night when all my friends would do their damnedest to scare me so bad that I would bolt and run. They succeeded a few times when we were all under 9 years old, but something shifted in me the year I turned 10, and none of us knew it until it was too late. As usual, I had my big Halloween party. As usual, all my buddies were there. And as usual, one of them wanted to try and scare the pants off me. About midway through the evening, I went down the hall to use the restroom, and while I was in there, my friend, I'll call him Aaron, scampered down the hall after me and hid in a darkened doorway. I came out of the restroom, started down the hall, and Aaron jumped out at me and grabbed my arm. Ordinarily, something like this would have made me bolt like a little chicken shit, but for some reason that night the fleet side of my fight or flight got turned off. The moment he grabbed me, I whirled and punched him square in the face without even thinking about what I was doing. It was all pure instinct, and after impact, I realized what I'd just done and freaked out. Aaron wrenched his mask off and was clutching his face and groaning, or so I thought, and I yelled for my dad, concerned I had really hurt my friend. My dad and all my other friends came running down the hall to find out what had happened. My dad flipped on the hallway light, and what greets us? Aaron with his face covered in blood. I am instantly horrified, thinking I busted his nose. But as I'm spewing apologies to him, I begin to realize he's not groaning, he's laughing. He grabs me by the hand I'd punched him with and yells, "What are you apologizing for? That was freaking awesome!" And he yanked my hand up over my head like I was a boxing champ and starts telling everyone how cool it was of me to just haul off and slug him. If you haven't guessed, Aaron was a pretty cool kid. He thought it was great that I'd suddenly found the courage to defend myself. My dad helped get him cleaned up, though he insisted on keeping his now bloody costume on, and inspected his nose. Thankfully, it wasn't actually broken, but I still feel a wave of guilt when I remember the sight of his face covered in blood, and remember the feeling of my fist hitting him in the schnoz. I'll always be grateful to him for handling it so well, and encouraging me for standing up for myself, but I still feel so guilty about decking him that I can't even imagine how I would feel if I had actually broken his nose. I like this story. Your friend is awesome. Story 12. Oh, I have one for this. My grandpa was a bit old school and gave me prison yard advice for my first week of school. He said, "If anyone picks on you, just deal with them right then. Don't take it." First week of kindergarten, a grade 1 kid was pushing me around, not letting me go back to class. I pushed him down against a fence and kicked him in the face 3 or 4 times, splitting his nose. Almost got kicked out of school, until they found out my grandpa had told me to do it. Thing is, no one messed with me after, and that guy was nice to me all the way through to graduation. So grandpa gave you good advice, huh? Story 13. Back in middle school, a friend of mine threw a small wadded piece of paper at me. I retaliated by throwing the only thing I could find, which was mud close to my shoes. Smacked him right in the face with it. Worst part is, it turned out to be dog poo that was at the bottom of my shoe. I still vividly remember his angry, "The hell man, I throw paper at you and you throw dog crap?" Story 14. I think I have told this before, but I think I was 15 and was in class and sat next to a friend of mine. He, for no reason, began to say, "Ha ha, your bald father," which I followed up with, "Ha ha, your bald mother." He started crying and ran to the teacher. I honestly forgot his mom had cancer and was getting chemo. Story 15. A kid on my track team would always come by and take a drink of whatever I had with me. I was sick of it and brought a root beer with me, which had been spiked with 3 times of the recommended dose of root beer-flavored X-Lax. Sure enough, he came by and I said, "You know what, Tony? Why don't you just take the whole thing?" Well, we were having a home meet that day, and he was our best pole vaulter and part of the relay team. I thought maybe he'd feel a little off and under preform. In the midst of our warm-ups, he went missing and was absent the entire meet. Story 16. This will probably be buried or no one will read it, but I was in 4th grade, and I had just moved schools because I was assaulted at my old school so bad I was put into the hospital. And I was experiencing PTSD from it, so I was having issues at school for the first few weeks because of the flashbacks and noises. We were on the playground, and I was feeling brave enough to play kickball with the boys in my class and asked if I could play. The bad leader of the boys said, "Girls can't play kickball because they weren't good at it." I said I wanted to play, and he couldn't stop me from playing. He pushed me, and when his hands touched my shoulders, I felt threatened, and I punched him so hard in the face that his nose broke. There was blood everywhere, and he fell backwards and fainted. I never was told I couldn't play kickball again, and the d***wad became one of my best friends in middle school. He still has a big bump on his nose, where I broke it. Story 17. This is my story. Went far but didn't exactly feel bad after. It was 7th grade and I was a tiny little white girl living in the inner city. Being a Marine brat and being so tiny, by age 10 I was a black belt in karate. However, no one at school knew. My bully was twice my size, a boy, and made my life living hell the entire year. My mom went to the school repeatedly to get something done, but nothing was ever done. Fast forward to the last few weeks of school. We are in class watching Babe. He's sitting behind me calling me a etc. I have enough and get up and get into his face and ask him to repeat it to, which he replies, "I called your mom a whore, must be where you get it from." I slap him and he just sits there in disbelief. I go to turn, and he gets this bright idea to put me in a headlock. Big mistake. That's one of the first defenses we learn how to get out of. I get out of the headlock and start beating him so badly I black out. I came to the teacher screaming and him on the floor covered in blood. I walked to the principal's office where they called my mom, and I sat there freaking out because I'm like, crap, I'm in so much trouble. Nope. She walked in and gave me a high five and told them if they suspended me, she would return with her lawyer because she gave them every opportunity to stop him. He was suspended for the rest of the year. He never messed with another person again in middle school. Story 18. Co-worker and I had a friendly prank war spanning 2 years. Close to the end of our war, he iced my car. Icing involves taking the hose to the parking lot every half hour and spraying a light mist over your victim's car when it's below 0 out. I finished my 12-hour shift to find a car encased in 2 inches of ice. My revenge was, I thought, both more inconvenient for him and less freezing my balls off for me. I decided to take a bed sheet, drape it over his car, and only took 4 or 5 trips out with the hose the next night. So the next morning he finds his car with a 1/4 inch of ice freezing a sheet to his car. When he started peeling off the sheet, he pulled his windshield wipers, arms and all, off of his ratty Jeep. I got a very pissed off phone call. I felt bad. The unwritten rule was embarrassing or inconvenient, no damage. I paid for repairs, and he got his revenge. He planted a dozen pieces of smoked herring throughout my car. Took me 6 months to find the last piece. Hidden under the carpet under the back window of my car. I can still smell it. I don't even own the car anymore. Story 19. Had a big group of friends from 13-18. When we were 17, one of them stole my girlfriend. To be fair, he legitimately knew we were going out. He got her drunk and shagged her at a party. He knew I'd find out. Said to my face he didn't care. Tough crap, mate. It was her fault as well, of course. She wasn't passed out or anything like that. She'd been leading him on and was sober enough to consent, if drunk enough to get over the social stigma of actually doing it. So from that point on, our group of friends just cut this guy out of our circle. We stopped inviting him to stuff. If he tried to hang out, we told him to piss off. Mates that had been friends with him since primary school just ignored him. Initially, I was super proud of this show of solidarity from my bros. My best mate was actually dating my now ex-girlfriend's best mate, and he split up with her because of her attitude about the whole thing, trying to defend her friend to him and make him hang out with them as a foursome. So, first summer back from university, we're all 19-20. We see him in a local pub. I don't know what to do, decide to try and be cool about it, and go up to say hi. He tells me to go to hell. I guess he blames me for all his friends cutting him out of his life. I don't get the chance to explain that. I in no way asked them to do that. They just did what they saw as the right thing. 2 weeks later, we're in the same pub, and I see his younger sister. She's 17 now, very, very attractive. I start a conversation with her about her brother, and how I feel bad about what we did. She says that it did really hurt him, but he's got some new friends now, mostly from uni, and is still with my ex, despite a long-distance relationship over the university semesters. He won't talk to any of us old friends, though, which I think is a genuine shame. He's known some of the guys since we were 5. One drink leads to another with this girl, and we end up back at her house. Her parents are away, her brother is staying at my ex's flat. She has her own flat, didn't go to university, got a job. So empty house. We end up gagging. Next morning, her bro calls round just as I'm leaving. The look on his face as he works out what's happened. He goes from utter despair to absolutely mental in about half a second. Eventually, I just had to leave. His sister finally managed to explain to him that it was nothing to do with revenge or anything, and that I was genuinely sorry for how we treated him. I don't know if she told him the whole conversation we had about how I'd feel bad as I didn't want to upset him anymore. And she convinced me to come back to hers by saying she was her own woman, could make her own decisions, and he wasn't due to be home at any time. If he hadn't have randomly turned up, I hope he'd have never known. He still won't accept my Facebook friend request, though. Story 20. I was 11, my older brother was 16. We would fight and argue, but one time I was running up the stairs away from him and he whipped the back of my legs with a long rubber chew toy. It left a pretty big, figure 8-shaped welt on my legs. I knew he was faster and stronger than me, and I knew if I tried to attack him, he'd stop me. So I grabbed a flathead screwdriver and held it over the stove until it was red hot. I ran up to him and very openly went to stab him, knowing he'd stop me. He grabbed my wrist to stop my thrust, as anticipated, and I pushed the red-hot head of it into his forearm as hard as I could. Man, I was a crazy asshole as a kid. Sorry, Mike. Story 21. I had a girlfriend cheat on me, lie about it when I confronted her, and gave her the chance to come clean and work through it, and stalk me after I broke up with her. We were quite young, 17, so it was all very overdramatic, but I did love her a lot and was hurt by what she did. At the same time, I was very done and not interested in reconciling. She didn't get the hint. I asked her nicely many times, then not so nicely, then demanded she f off. She would for a while, but then she'd show up drunk and try and pick fights, insult me, and be sincerely hurtful. I eventually had enough, as you do. I told a couple of choice people in her school, different to mine, what she'd done, with gory details. She'd off her ex in his car, thought she'd get dragged for it and that would be that. Well, turns out she was a bitch in all other aspects of her life too. Apparently, she was loathed at school, and people jumped on this news like starving beasts on fresh meat. I had texts and IMs from people I didn't even know asking to confirm the news, which I ignored because I was really done with the whole situation by now. I eventually heard from other friends at that school that people had not let it drop, and had even stuck posters around the school with pictures of her, announcing what she'd done, offering her services with her phone number, photoshopping bananas into her mouth, etc. It was brutal, and she had to change schools in her final year. I did feel a bit bad. If I'd known it would go that far, I might have rethought telling those people. At the same time, she hurt me badly. She refused to leave me alone despite months of chances, and the other students reacted so viciously because apparently she was a total asshole to everyone in the school, so I don't know. I sure as hell didn't expect that, though. I hope you enjoy this video.